Okay, so Tokyo Shemp, this is some more background for you. You can see Pasta in the photo right here. Like, you can literally see him slouched over with his fat belly and everything else. And that looks like Fiorella sitting a couple chairs over, right? I think Lauren Steiner was in there somewhere too. Like, this is what the press room looks like, okay? This was the 2019 Long Beach convention. I don't know if it was an e-board or if it was a convention, but this is where all the presidential candidates came, and they were doing. Everybody came back to this room to do like a Q&A with the press after they had spoken to the delegates, right? The only two people who didn't come back was well, Bernie did not come back, but I happened to catch him on his way out of the convention and I got a picture with him. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, point being, you can see Fiorella is in the center of the photo. Pasta is looking like his fat ass over to the right of, well, I guess it'd be the left of the photo. No, it'd be the right of the photo, would it? I don't know. I don't know how you'd I don't know. Okay, so let me see if I can wheel this back so you can see. This is actually, the reason I recorded this is because Andrew Yang is actually on my friends list. And I knew for a fact that if I recorded this, it would go directly to his wall because he has no protections on his Facebook page. And since he sent me a friend request back in 2018 because he was trying to get all of the top Bernie organizers on his friends list, he added me. I didn't know who he was until, he started running for president. And I'm like, oh my God, he's on my friends list. What a trip. But yeah, I talked to him. I got a selfie with him. He was super tight with Cory Booker, but now I'm giving you some background you don't need. But you can see Fiorella's in the center of the photo. Pasta is looking like his fat ass on the side there. I can't even with Pasta. Fucking A, dude. Come on, Craig. All right, let me see if I can pull this back. I'm 12 seconds in. All right, let's go.
I get some juice. Yes. What a delight. Juice.
Andrew, you denounced other Medicare for All plans in the past, saying they would be too disruptive. What do you think of Elizabeth Warren's new transition plan? Does that address your concerns?
It does in part. I think Senator Warren is wrong when she says that all Americans uniformly hate their health insurance plans and coverage. That's not the case in the studies I've seen. When you ask Americans how many of them like their insurance coverage, it's actually a significant proportion. And so if we're going to...
Oh my God, you're such a jackass, Andrew Yang. I can't even with you. Literally, this is a basic thing that every American needs. And, I can't even. Okay, let's go.
Convince Americans to shift to a different healthcare plan. To me, the best way to do that is to provide a superior option that Americans would prefer. I think her new transition timeline is better than saying we're going to do it all at once. But I'm skeptical that some of her funding mechanisms are realistic, because a lot of the funding...
He's such a goddamn libertarian, y'all. I can't even with this dude.
Comes from an elevated wealth tax of 6%. And when the wealth tax has been implemented in Sweden, Germany, France, Denmark, and other countries, it has not met its revenue targets, and it's had massive compliance issues. And that would be even more true at 6% than it would at 2%.
Mr. Yang.
I like to go man-woman, so...
Yes, you strongly support UBI. But what if UBI... No. What if UBI happens and then your landlord raises your rent $1,000? What mechanisms are there to protect that from happening?
I love this question because it's assuming that I become president of the United States in 2021. We pass the freedom dividend. Everyone gets $1,000 a month. It makes a stronger health. Chips and decision making, creates hundreds of thousands of jobs around the country. And then some landlords look up and say, ooh, maybe I can stick it to tenants because they're getting an extra $1,000 a month. If you look at our economy today, there are three core sources of inflation that are making us miserable. Unfortunately, they're the three big ones. housing, education, and healthcare. If you look at our other consumer goods, most of them are staying the same in cost or getting better or cheaper. What am I talking about? Clothing, electronics, media, most food, cars, all staying stable in price or getting cheaper or better. So why are housing, education, and healthcare getting more and more expensive? It's because these markets are dysfunctional in different ways. Education, the cost of college has gone up 250%, even though it has not gotten any better. Healthcare, their business model is just to raise the prices every single year. Notice how drug prices and insurance prices never go down, they only go up. Housing, there are a number of issues. One is that it's hard to develop affordable housing in many parts of the country because of NIMBYism and the fact that everyone's for affordable housing in the abstract, but then when you say, hey, it's going to be in your neighborhood, then they say, how about it be somewhere else? So what you have to do is you have to put buying power into our hands that would actually make it harder for us to be exploited and pushed around. So imagine if everyone here got an extra $1,000 a month, you're very happy, you're like, wow, that Yang guy really did it. And then the next year your landlord was like, hey, I'm going to ratchet up your rent by $1,000. What would you do? Would you say, oh, I guess I'm paying that rent? Of course not. You would look around and say, wait a minute, is there another place that's not going to stick it to me? And then you try and find another landlord that's not trying to gouge you.
Oh, because they won't all like get together and do the same goddamn thing. Oh my God, even.
Degree. Maybe you find that landlord, and let's say every landlord decided to try and stick it to everyone. Then you would look up and say, okay, there are 3 or 4 of us. With an extra $1,000 a month, that's an extra $4,000 a month. Maybe we will buy a fixer-upper and actually make that someplace we can live, particularly because of...
This is the dumbest idea fucking ever. This is so dumb. Universal basic income is a dumb ass idea. It will not, like, literally, I mean, it would cause inflation, period. And it's not going to provide any services to the public. This is so dumb.
Freedom dividend is portable. It goes with you wherever you go. It actually makes us much harder to push around for landlords. But the goal is to have separate plans in place to reduce the inflation in housing, education, and healthcare that are making us miserable. Because in the other marketplaces, you see that a combination of price sensitivity among consumers and competitive dynamics in those markets actually keeps prices lower.
So like
Yes.
So here this week in California at Saugus High School, a 16-year-old student
So heartbreaking.
killed two students. I was there reporting on the ground, and many parents are asking what could be done. Whether is it metal detectors, is it more mental health counselors? Do you think Big Pharma is playing a role in what's going on with mental health and younger children?
Now, I'm the parent to 2 young boys, and my son's school just had its first active shooter drill, and my son is 4 years old. And so you have to ask yourself, is this where our country is, and how can we improve it? I looked at what happened in Santa Clarita. It's heartbreaking, man. I'm sorry you had to report on that and see what was happening in the families and communities. As a parent, it's heart-wrenching. And to me, we have to attack the epidemic of gun violence at every level. So you start at the top with common sense gun laws that most Americans at this point should have been passed years ago, and you break the stranglehold of the NRA. But in this particular case, some of those laws would not have influenced this particular shooting, because this was not an assault weapon. This was not someone who's going to run afoul of a background check. I don't believe this particular individual had any record to speak of. And so then you have to go deeper. What is the chain of events that leads to gun violence? The last steps are procuring a gun and then using it, which are terrible, tragic steps. But we all know that there are many steps that happen beforehand, including in this case. So I'm talking about what's going on in families, what's going on in schools, what's going on in communities. And we have to face facts that 96% plus of the shooters we're talking about are boys or men. We have a massive failure in our society to help turn our boys into strong, healthy men. And as a parent to 2 boys, I see this, and I can see that having the wrong boy in the wrong school can lead to tragic outcomes. Generally for the boy and his family, but every once in a while those outcomes can become externalized and tragic to others. So we have to try and rebuild from the ground up our families, our schools. We have to make our schools so they're not assembly lines with these standardized tests that kids all feel like they're just on an assembly line moving forward. They're just like an interchangeable widget. We have to have an education system that treats our kids as individuals who learn differently, who might be at different stages, that they're not all going to be at the same point in their development at age 12 or 13 or 14. And this is a very high bar for schools. Most schools right now do not have the expertise or resources to be able to help our kids, boys in particular, manage some of these issues. And that's what we can influence that might have helped prevent this particular tragedy. I would invest in social and emotional learning in every school, in managing technology, because one of the things that we also do not talk about is that the mental health crisis among young people is hand in hand, is lockstep with smartphone adoption and use of social media apps. And as a child...
What the fuck even? Oh my god, dude. Oh my god, dude. No. Literally, we have like a mental health crisis in America, and you need to have counselors dealing with these students. But you literally transitioned to, we have to promote Silicon Valley in our schools. I can't even with you, dude.
I was a very shy, introverted kid, but when I went home and I shut the door, my classmates were not in the room with me. You know what I mean? It's like you shut the door and then you could read a book and get lost in your own world, and it's not like you have to worry about what people are thinking about you or saying to you. But our kids today, their peers are with them everywhere they go. So the way we prevent this tragedy, we start with the guns, yes, but we have to go deeper and start trying to reconstitute our families, our schools, our approach to mental health, our approach to our educational system, and our approach to technology, particularly in the hands of kids, minors, and teenagers. Andrew.
So you know who was funding him at this point. Like, you can tell who was funding him.
Woman, yes.
Thank you. Laura Marine from Long Beach Life. So the only candidate I've been hearing talk about this, the ERA, was Kamala Harris. So what would you do as president to help push that through?
The Equal Rights Amendment should have been law. And the fact that it's not, I actually had to look up and say, wait a minute, we actually don't protect equal rights for people with sexual orientation. Like, I assumed that we actually had done that quite some time ago. So I'm 100% aligned with the fact that we need to make it a law, and I would make it a top priority as president. I think that we should do a number of things with the Supreme Court in particular. Number one, we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices. At this point, there is no reason why we are following a...
By the way, there is a bill that's been introduced by, I think, Ro Khanna and Senator, is his name Markley or Markey or something like that, to introduce term limits. But the question is, like, how do you do it, right? Because you have to term out the people who have been on the Supreme Court the longest first. So there's lots of discussion around, like, how would it actually be implemented?
Centuries-old practice of lifetime appointments. When the Constitution was written, people did not live as long as they did now, as they do now. And Supreme Court justices actually step down all the time for any of a number of reasons. They did not have that post until literally they were at death's door. And number two, I would look at expanding the Supreme Court, because that would actually help depoliticize it. If you have 18-year terms and a larger bench, then instead of being...
By the way, this was before Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. This particular press conference happened before she passed.
Court judge in place that's going to have an impact for 30 years hence. You're rotating one off every 2 years, and then our laws can evolve more with our society with the times.
Last question.
Spoken recently about
Thank you so much. I started the Yang cheer too, by the way.
Yeah, you did. I appreciate that.
No problem. So
you start the Yang cheers.
You get a question. All right. So a lot of progressives love a lot of your economic ideas. However, some of us are very concerned when it comes to foreign policy.
Some of us. Let's get that.
Some of us are when it comes to foreign policy. Let's just take Bolivia, for instance. Would you call it a coup as well?
going to outline some of my foreign policy principles to give you a sense of where I am.
Okay, so this is my point, Tokyo Shem. Pasta was asking that question of every single presidential candidate. That was his only question. That was the only question he asked of every single presidential candidate. He came with that question and that question alone.
I've signed a pledge to end the forever wars. We should not be in a constant state of armed conflict, as we have been for the last 18 years. In our Constitution, it does not say that it's in the president's capacity to even declare war. It says it's an act of Congress. But Congress has ceded that responsibility to the executive branch for the last 18 years, and that is not the way it should be. If we do intervene militarily, there's a three-part test. You can call it the Yang Doctrine. Number one, there has to be a vital national interest at stake, or we can avert humanitarian catastrophe. Number two, there's a clear and defined timeline for how long our troops will be in the theater and in harm's way. And number three, there are allies and partners that are willing to join us in the mission. If those three things are in place, then I would consider military action. And that gives you a sense of how my progressive priorities apply internationally. The reason why I think we are suffering so much under President Trump.
Progressive. He literally went through and looked for Bernie organizers in 2018 and added us to his friends list, so that he could try and like scoop us out and break up Bernie's support. That's what happened. Like he's on my friends list for that reason. He added me in 2018. I was loyal and I became a Bernie victory captain. But that's how he tried to scoop people away from Bernie. This dude was a freaking operative. He was literally trying to tank Bernie's campaign.
Look at the order of operations. Our strength abroad reflects how we're doing at home. We are falling apart at home. We elected a narcissist reality TV star as our president. He is now an erratic and unpredictable foreign policy leader. Our allies are looking around saying, what the heck happened in the United States? So how do we come back from this? We become stronger and more whole at home. And then we go to our partners and say, America is back. We're going to have a sustained and reliable foreign policy set of priorities that you can actually rely on over the long haul. I think it was James Mattis who said, if we invest less in diplomats, we have to invest more in ammunition. And that's not a dove, that's the former Secretary of Defense. We need to invest more in diplomats and less in ammunition.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Mr. Yang, what is your position on reparations? What is your position on reparations?
Zach says, wait, I got a question on climate change.
Climate change, yeah. Yes, you know we are.
You're trying.
Climate catastrophe right now. We wanted to know, you plan to ban fracking, and on your first day in office, will you make sure that if the United States starts working on 100% clean energy, preferably without nuclear?
I released a fairly extensive climate change platform about, 3-4 weeks ago. It includes the fact that we have to move on from subsidizing fossil fuel industries who benefited from tens of billions of dollars in subsidies and turn those funds and subsidies to solar, wind, renewable source of energy. We should tax carbon and pollution immediately. One of the big problems in American life today is that there are these negative externalities that companies don't pay for and we all pay for. And if you think about the cost of climate change, what is that in dollar terms? Trillions of dollars, millions of lives. If we have the companies who are polluting actually pay a price for that, then we would change their incentives and generate hundreds of billions in new revenue that we could then apply to solving the problem. The tough truth of this is that the United States of America only accounts for about 15% of global emissions. So even if we were to very aggressively move in a more renewable direction, if the other 85% is rising, then the Earth will continue to warm. And we're already at the point of no return in many respects. What's happening in the rest of the world is that China is going to developing countries and saying, hey, great news, I've got a power plant for you, it burns coal. And then what does that country say? Great, because they just want energy as cheaply as possible. So if we're going to curb those emissions, what we have to do is be at that table and say, instead of taking that coal-burning power plant from the Chinese, you should take these solar panels or these wind turbines, and we will subsidize them to a point where they're actually cost competitive and a no-brainer for you. We also have to start investing in protecting our communities. We already have climate refugees in the United States of America. I was in New Hampshire because I'm running for president, so you go to New Hampshire a lot. And in Portsmouth, there's a shrimping business that went from millions of dollars to zero because all the shrimp died. And the houses and buildings that are on that shoreline have started flooding regularly. So this is no longer speculative, this is with us right now. And instead of leaving Americans to their own devices to try and protect themselves from climate change, we should be investing tens, hundreds of billions of dollars right now to make our communities more resilient to the ravages of climate change. If we spend the money now, we'll actually save money. The current American approach is to wait until the disaster happens and then try and clean it up. And that is not what you want to do with climate change. Here in California, you're seeing it with the forest fires that are dislocating tens, hundreds of thousands of people, costing lives. Those forest fires are not an act of God. They're the result of the fact that climate change has made all of the underbrush in the forests tinderboxes, and we do not have the government resources to actually manage the hazards over time. We're actively managing less than 10% of U.S. forest land and clearing it of underbrush that would eventually cause fires that then end up spreading very, very quickly and wildly. So this is not an act of God. This is a failure of government. We need to dramatically improve our approach to forest management and make it so that we don't have forest fires and wildfires here in California year-round. So it's an existential crisis that we need to rise to the occasion for. There's a proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. We should have done this 20 years ago, but as president, I will do it now. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Andrew, thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.